Hi, I'm Eric Lanigan with Lanigan&Lanigan Attorneys in Winter Park. We do bankruptcies, and we do a lot of bankruptcies. The question that we always have to be asking ourselves and be honest with ourselves is bankruptcy the answer for this particular client? I'm reminded of what a doctor told me one time talking about medical specialists. And he said, you know, if what you own is a hammer, then everything you see is a nail. And that obviously means that if you've got a hammer and you make money pounding nails, then you see everything as a nail that needs to be pounded. And we have to always double check ourselves to make sure that if we are thinking about things not always just thinking about things in a bankruptcy context, but looking at things in the context of, is bankruptcy the solution to the individual's problem? And what brings this to light is a case we recently had with a couple at very high income, both of them very successful, incomes in probably in the neighborhood of $35,000 a month combined income. Their problem is that several years ago they had gotten involved in several high-end real estate investments and signed guarantees on something like $4.5 million worth of loans. And all of these real estate projects and another business venture all collapsed. And so while they have a very high income level, they're suddenly staring at $4.5 million in business debt and another $1.5 million of home mortgage and other personal debt. And given their ages, this is debt that we're not going to be able to pay. Now, the first blush was, well, because their debt is primarily business related, they could file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy and just wipe it all out. And because of the exception in the bankruptcy code that you do not have to stay under the income levels for filing to qualify for Chapter 7 if in fact your debt is primarily business debt. And if it is, then your income level as far as making too much money to file Chapter 7 is now irrelevant. There may be other factors, but that is at least irrelevant. So that would be a very easy solution for those individuals. However, what we found out is they had actually entered into a settlement agreement on the largest of the debts, which was in excess of $3 million, where they would be paying a very, very small fraction of that $3 million. And the problem was, every agreement like that I've ever seen in my entire working career said that if you default on that obligation, then the debt reverts back to the original amount. This agreement, for whatever reason, it did not. So even though they defaulted on that settlement agreement on the debt, it did not go back, their liability did not go back to the original $3.5 million. So they could not file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. So what you have to be careful of is if you've got a hammer and every problem's a nail, then the first thing you say is, well, we'll file Chapter 13 bankruptcy and we'll go through the repayment of the debts through a structured plan in Chapter 13. The problem is, with these individuals, because their income is so high, they would have been paying well in excess of $10,000 or $15,000 a month in payments through the Chapter 13 bankruptcy. Well, if you're going to pay that much money, you don't need bankruptcy to settle your debts. And the reality is a good debt settlement / asset protection plan would ultimately get those debts settled for way, way less than that. So you have to be honest with yourself and say, look, Chapter 13, in fact, bankruptcy in its entirety is not the solution to your problem. And this is the way you're going to have to deal with your problem and move forward from there. So be very careful that when you're talking to a lawyer that you're not in a situation where he's got a hammer and therefore every problem's a nail. Again, I'm Eric Lanigan with Lanigan&Lanigan Attorneys, Winter Park, Florida.